right, we are back on PALS TV. I believe I bumped our next presenter off during our pre-meeting transition, so apologies for that. But we have an exciting finish to the day. We are going to finally get a little bit more in depth with Sir Sherlock Holmes, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then we still have a outdoor tour after that. So, if everyone recalls from today's art drawing class, I think Phil, it looks like the AOTL people drew him a little sign behind him. So how are you today, Phil?
I'm doing pretty well. How's yourself?
I'm doing well. I hear a rumor that it's your birthday.
It is indeed.
It looks like it. We all made hats, so I think Bianca will be stopping by later with her hat. So, Nick, did you make your hat yet? No, there's still time. So make sure that while you guys listen to Sherlock Holmes, you make your hat for the end of the segment. But I'll let Professor Phil get to it because I'm excited to hear what Sherlock's up to.
Okay, T. Let's get into this. Good to see everybody, by the way. We'll throw this one up. Let me kill this side. We don't need that. And I will move my screen over there. Perfect. Okay, so as Jonah was saying, we're going to get into an actual start of the mystery. They just left because one of the two police detectives had said he's got a case that is confusing to him and needs Sherlock's help. And Sherlock said, "Hey, Watson, come on along." So they've just taken off in their cab, a hansom cab. Not handsome, but hansom cab, which is open carriage with one horse usually, sometimes two. But let's get right into it. It was a foggy, cloudy morning, and a dun-colored veil hung over the housetops, looking like the reflection of the mud-colored streets beneath. Not really an enjoyable weather situation. Everything is brown and gray and dirty. This is very common for London at the time. Victorian London had a lot of industry. This is true of New York back then as well. So they put a lot of coal smoke up in the air because coal was what we used. And so everything was just dirty. There's also a lot of water in the air, a lot of rain. Not as much rain as people think in London, which creates a lot of fog as everything comes up. So that fog would combine with all the coal dust in the air. And that's what, when you talk about the London fog, that's the one they're talking about. It's not just fog you can't see through. It's fog connected with coal dust. You can't see anything, and breathing is awful. So everything is always dirty around London back at this time. My companion was in the best of spirits and prattled away about Cremona fiddles and the difference between a Stradivarius and an Amati. So as they're riding, Sherlock, although he likes to just sit and do nothing for long periods of time, right now he's just talking about violin. Cremona is a region where some good fiddles come from, and Stradivarius and Amatis are extremely good violins. They're still today, they're, 150 years old by the time Sherlock and Watson were there, and they are still good today. Another 150 years. They're very old fiddles, they are wonderful. As for myself, I was silent. For the dull weather and the melancholy. Why is that not going? There we go. As for myself, I was silent. For the dull weather and the melancholy business upon which we were engaged depressed my spirits. So Watson has been kind of feeling rough after his sickness, but he's really feeling rough because it's not very pretty out, and, well, they're going to deal with a murder, and that is not a happy thing to deal with. You don't seem to give much thought to the matter in hand, I said at last, interrupting Holmes' musical disposition. So Watson thinks it's strange. We're going to solve this murder mystery, and you're sitting here talking about violins. No data yet, he answered. It is a capital mistake to theorize before you have all the evidence. It biases the judgment. Sherlock says, well, we don't know anything. All I've got is this information that I got from the detective, and I don't care about that. It's the stuff I need to see. That's what's important. You will have your data soon, I remarked, pointing with my finger. This is the Brixton Road, and that is the house, if I am not very much mistaken. And Watson says, oh, good, we're here. You'll be able to find out what's going on. So it is. Stop, driver, stop. We were still 100 yards or so from it, but he insisted upon our alighting, and we finished our journey upon foot. So instead of pulling right up to the door, Sherlock says, oh, we're a couple houses down. We're getting out now, and we're walking up there. Oh, but why would that possibly be? Let's find out. Number 3, Lauriston Gardens, wore an ill-omened and minatory look. That's a depressing-looking house. It looks scary. It was one of 4, which stood back some little way from the street, 2 being occupied and 2 empty. There's 4 houses all together in this little block. 2 of them don't have anybody living in it. The latter looked out with 3 tiers of vacant, melancholy windows, which were blank and dreary, save that here and there a to let card had developed like a cataract upon the bleared pane. I was just describing, well, these empty houses look especially depressing because there isn't anything in the windows except somebody's got for rent signs up there. You'll remember that when the detective sent, Gregson, the detective, sent the letter, he said, this is in an empty house. So one of these 2 empty houses is the one they're going to. A small garden sprinkled over with a scattered eruption of sickly plants separated each of these houses from the street and was traversed by a narrow pathway, yellowish in color, and consisting apparently of a mixture of clay and of gravel. Even today in England, when they say garden, they do not mean what we mean by garden, where you got a bunch of flowers or vegetables or things like that. What they mean is a lawn. So everybody's got a small front lawn in front of each of these houses, and it's got some extra plants, and nobody's really been taking care of it, and it's got a clay and gravel pathway. Oddly, the clay is yellowish in color, which is strange for London. You're more likely to see yellow clay and rock up in Bath, which is nearby, but not that close. The whole place was very sloppy from the rain, which had fallen through the night. The garden was bounded by a 3-foot brick wall with a fringe of wood rails on top. And against this wall was leaning a stalwart police constable, surrounded by a small knot of loafers who craned their necks and strained their eyes in the vain hope of catching some glimpse of the proceeding within. Pardon me. So there's a little fence in front of the garden that holds off each of the houses, and there's a police officer standing out in front and a bunch of onlookers trying to say, hey, what's going on? Why are the police at this vacant house? And the police officer is not letting them in. Specifically, the police constable rather than officers, which means this is the lowest rank of police in the London Metropolitan Service. I'd imagine that Sherlock Holmes would at once have hurried into the house and plunged into a study of the mystery. Nothing appeared to be further from his intention. So Watson figures, oh, you're this detective. You're going to go in there and see what's going on. But it appears that that is not what Sherlock is doing. So what is he doing? With an air of nonchalance, which, under the circumstances, seemed to me to border upon affectation, he lounged up and down the pavement and gazed vacantly at the ground, the sky, the opposite houses, and the line of rail. So instead of being really interested in what's going on in the murder scene, Sherlock is instead kind of wandering around, looking at stuff, seeing what's in the neighborhood. And he seems so bored with it that Watson thinks, Not only are you relaxed, you seem to be pretending to be extra relaxed. So everybody's just saying, oh, what a relaxed person is. That's his affectation. He's doing this to give himself an air of mystery and look important. Having finished his scrutiny, he proceeded slowly down the path, or rather down the fringe of grass which flanked the path, keeping his eyes riveted upon the ground. So he looks around at everything, and then Sherlock walks along the path, just off of it, where the grass is, and staring at the grass and the path. But he's not walking on the path itself. Twice he stopped, and once I saw him smile and heard him utter an exclamation of satisfaction. So he's walking along, and he sees something and stops, looks a little further, and then he sees something else and says, "Oh!" and goes on. That is an awesome hat, Caitlin. You look like a bishop. There were many marks of footsteps upon the wet, clayey soil, but since the police had been coming and going over it, I was unable to see how my companion could hope to learn anything from it. So we've got this path that, as we said, was clay and gravel, and you can see a bunch of footprints and things like that. But the police have been walking in and out, and anybody else could have been walking in and out. So it's been disturbed a lot, and Watson has no idea how this would matter, since any footprint you could be from anybody. Still, I had such extraordinary evidence of the quickness of perceptive faculty that I had no doubt that he could see a great deal which was hidden from me. Well, this does seem like it wouldn't tell you a whole lot, but I saw how interested or how easily he found out that I was in Afghanistan. So I'm going to assume that Sherlock knows what's going on. At the door of the house, we were met by a tall, white-faced, flaxen-haired man with a notebook in his hand, who rushed forward and wrung my companion's hand with effusion. "It is indeed kind of you to come," he said. "I have left everything untouched." So somebody runs up, a pale, blonde man who's carrying a notebook, and he's very excited to see Sherlock. He's like, "It's great you're here. We haven't touched anything." "Except that," my friend answered, pointing at the pathway. "If a herd of buffaloes had passed along, there could not be a greater mess. No doubt, however, you had drawn your own conclusions, Gregson, before you permitted this." And as Watson had noted, Sherlock is also upset. "You said you left everything untouched," and this blonde guy is clearly Detective Gregson. He said, "You've had everybody walk up and down on this pathway. It's obscured all the clues." And Sherlock is definitely being passively aggressive, sarcastic. He says, "Yeah, clearly you figured out everything you could find out about the pathway before you let everybody stomp all over it and destroy all the clues." "I've had so much to do inside the house," the detective said evasively. "My colleague, Mr. Lestrade, is here. I'd relied upon him to look after this." You'll recall that Sherlock had mentioned that Gregson and Lestrade are professional rivals. So Gregson says, "Yeah, this is all messed up, but I was just doing the inside. This is all Lestrade's fault." Holmes glanced at me and raised his eyebrows sardonically. "With two men such as yourself and Lestrade upon the ground, there will not be much for a third party to find out," he said. Again, Holmes is being sarcastic here. "Stand by, I gotta get this one. First I need, oh. I don't even know how to mute myself. Hang on. Hello? For no reason whatsoever, I would say, no. I think it's way to lead off. Not you stay inside the box and don't do stuff. Okay. That's what you do. All right. Thank you.
You got your hat on.
Okay, it's cool. I'm back. I don't remember if I explained this one, so let's go with this. So Holmes again being sarcastic and saying, "Hey,
Are you having your hat on?
you and Lestrade have probably figured everything out."
At 1 o'clock.
Gregson rubs his hands in a self-satisfied way. "I think we have done all that can be done," he answered. "It's a queer case, though, and I knew your taste for such things." So Gregson says, "Look, we've gathered all the clues and stuff, and I think we've got the best stuff. But this is kind of strange, and you really like a strange case." Gregson is trying to pretend that he doesn't really need Sherlock to help him, and he's just doing this as a favor for Sherlock, to make Gregson feel better about himself. "You did not come here in a cab?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "No, sir." "Nor Lestrade?" "No, sir." Sherlock says, "Okay, neither of you guys came in a cab. You walked up here, right?" And Gregson says, yeah. We walked, didn't take a cab. "Then let us go and look at the room." With which inconsequent remark, he strode on into the house, followed by Gregson, whose features expressed his astonishment. Sherlock says, "Okay, let's go look at the murder scene." And he walks on in to go do it. And Gregson has no idea why he was asking about this cab. What goes on with it? A short passage, bare planked and dusty, led to the kitchen and offices. 2 doors opened out of it to the left and to the right. So they go into a little hallway, and it goes back into the kitchen, and there's offices back there, a study, basically, in a house. And there's a door on either side of the hallway. One of these had obviously been closed for many weeks. The other belonged to the dining room, which was the apartment in which the mysterious affair had occurred. So there's one door, which the police have opened, but it's clearly been shut, presumably because there's dust and it smells musty in there. And then the other one is open into the dining room, and this is where all the police officers are at and where the murder has occurred. Holmes walked in, and I followed him with that subdued feeling at my heart, which the presence of death inspires. So they walk into the dining room, and Watson's like, "Oh, this is just depressing. Nobody wants to show up at a murder. It's just sad." It was a large square room, looking all the larger from the absence of all furniture. A vulgar flaring paper adorned the walls, but it was blotched in places with mildew, and here and there great strips had become detached and hung down, exposing the yellow plaster beneath. Remember, this has been an empty house for some time, so there isn't any furniture in there, so it looks all empty, and the wallpaper's all starting to fall apart and get dirty. Opposite the door was a showy fireplace, surmounted by a mantelpiece of imitation white marble. On one corner of this was stuck the stump of a red wax candle. There's a fireplace. Remember, this is before electricity, before much electricity, really. Certainly not in houses. So there's a fireplace in most rooms just for warmth. And on this fireplace, there's a little candle on one of the corners of the mantel. The solitary window was so dirty that the light was hazy and uncertain, giving a dull gray tinge to everything, which was intensified by the thick layer of dust which coated the whole apartment. And when they're saying apartment here, that just means room. So he's just talking about this dining room. And there's one window, but since nobody's been living here, nobody's been washing the windows. So it's dirty and you're not getting a lot of light. All these details I observed afterwards. At present, my attention was centered upon the single grim, motionless figure which lay stretched upon the boards, with vacant, sightless eyes staring up at the discolored ceiling. Watson says, yeah, I wrote all this stuff and told you what the room looked like. But when I first walked in, I didn't notice that stuff. First thing I noticed was there's a dead body in the middle of the floor. It was that of a man about 43 or 44 years of age, middle-sized, broad-shouldered, and with crisp curling back hair and a short, stubbly beard. So he describes the guy. Middle-aged guy, of a fine age, about average in size, pretty broad shoulders, black hair and a beard. Beards aren't very common at this time. Most men shaved in Victorian London. He was dressed in a heavy broadcloth frock coat and waistcoat with light-colored trousers and immaculate collar and cuffs. A top hat, well brushed and trim, was placed on the floor beside him. So he's in a fairly common business suit for the time, basically. A top hat is a little fancy, maybe if you're going out, but would not be terribly out of the way. It's not surprising. His hands were clenched and his arms thrown abroad, while his lower limbs were interlocked, as though his death struggle had been a grievous one. So he's got his hands in fists, and his arms are way out, and his legs are all twisted together. On his rigid face, there stood an expression of horror, and, as it seemed to me, of hatred, which I have never seen upon human features. This malignant and terrible contortion, combined with the low forehead, blunt nose, and prognathous jaw, gave the dead man the singular, simious and ape-like appearance, which was increased by his writhing, unnatural posture. Once again, the Victorians at this time were very big on pretending that your personality, well, not pretending, they believed that your personality could be told by what you look like. And this guy has a big, heavy brow, his jaw sticks way out, his nose is big and flat, and he says, with the ways all twisted up, looks like a monkey, more like a gorilla than any other sort of monkey, but within the ape family. I have seen death in many forms, but never has appeared to me in a more fearsome aspect than in that dark, grimy apartment, which looked out upon one of the main arteries of suburban London. Remember, Watson is a doctor and was an army doctor, particularly, so he's seen a lot of dead bodies that come up, but he's never seen something that is as scary as a murder. Death on a battlefield, quite ugly, but it's not scary afterward. During the time, yeah. And in the hospital, death again, not real scary for the doctor. For the people dying, yeah, still scary. But murder, scary. Lestrade, lean and ferret-like as ever, was standing by the doorway and greeted my companion and myself. This case will make a stir, sir, he remarked. It beats anything I have seen. I am no chicken. In this case, Lestrade is not saying he's not a chicken, not that he's not afraid. He's saying he's no spring chicken that's come new to anything. He's seen a lot of cases, and he's saying this one is very strange. He doesn't understand it. There's no clue, said Gregson. None at all, chimed in Lestrade. So both the detectives said, it doesn't look like there's anything that explains how this happened, why this happened, who did it. Sherlock Holmes approached the body and, kneeling down, examined it intently. You are sure that there is no wound, he asked, pointing to numerous gouts and splashes of blood which lay all around. You remember the original letter, Gregson said that there's blood all over the place, but the body does not appear to be injured in any way. So Sherlock is just checking on this. He said, you're sure this guy hasn't been hurt in any way? Because there's blood all over the place. Positive, cried both detectives. Then, of course, this blood belongs to a second individual, presumably the murderer, if murder has been committed. It reminds me of the circumstances attendant upon the death of von Janssen and Utrecht in the year 34. Do you remember the case, Gregson? No, sir. So both the detectives say, yeah, this guy's definitely not injured in any way. And Sherlock says, well, if there's all this blood and he hasn't been hurt, then it's got to be somebody else's blood. And most likely, it would be the person who killed him. He must have been injured while doing that. This is very like a previous murder that happened in another country. And so, you guys remember it? I said, nope, we don't remember that, because nobody would except Sherlock. Read it up. You really should. There's nothing new under the sun. It has all been done before. Sherlock saying, if you knew this case, it's definitely going to explain this one. Or this old case. It's going to explain this current case. As he spoke, his nimble fingers were flying here, there, and everywhere, feeling, pressing, unbuttoning, examining, while his eyes wore the same faraway expression which I have already remarked upon. So Sherlock's poking and prodding at the body, fiddling with it, and he's got this distant look in his eyes, just staring into nothing. And Watson had noted that when he's really thinking about stuff, that's what Sherlock looks like. So swiftly was the examination made that one would hardly have guessed the minuteness with which it was conducted. Finally, he sniffed the dead man's lips and then glanced at the soles of his patent leather boots. So Sherlock does this really quickly, and he does it so quickly that you wouldn't expect him to be paying any attention at all to any of the clues or what he could possibly see. But Watson's saying, I've seen this guy do this before, and I know how carefully he's looking at that and paying attention. And at the very end, Sherlock smells near the guy's mouth and then looks at the bottom of his feet. He's not been moved at all, he asked. No more than was necessary for the purposes of our examination. You can take him to the mortuary now, he said. There's nothing more to be learned. Sherlock making sure nobody's moved the body. And the police say, no, we had to, move him around to make sure there weren't any injuries and stuff like that, just to check. But we moved him like out of place. And Sherlock says, all right, you can go ahead and take the body to the morgue. I've learned everything I can possibly learn from the body. Gregson had a stretcher and 4 men in hand. At his call, they entered the room, and the stranger was lifted and carried out. As they raised him, a ring tinkled down and rolled across the floor. Lestrade grabbed it up and stared at it with mystified eyes. So people come in and take the body away, take it to the morgue, and as they lift it up, a ring falls down. And the other police detective, says, oh, hey, there's a ring. I'll grab it. And he picks it up and looks at it and says, there's been a woman here, he cried. It's a woman's wedding ring, which is fairly self-explanatory. Hey, this guy's got a woman's wedding ring. Clearly, a woman was here, says the police officer. He held it out, as he spoke, upon the palm of his hand. We all gathered round him and gazed at it. There could be no doubt that circlet of plain gold had once adorned the finger of a bride. So he holds out the ring for everybody to see, and they all looking like, yeah, that's a woman's wedding ring, all right. This complicates matters, said Gregson. Heaven knows they were complicated enough before. You're sure it doesn't simplify them, observed Holmes? There's nothing to be learned by staring at it. What did you find in his pockets? So Gregson says, oh, this is confusing. Here's another piece of evidence that we don't know what to do with. And Sherlock says, doesn't this make this a lot easier? You can go ahead and put that ring away. What else did you find on the guy when you were examining? We have it all here, said Gregson, pointing to a litter of objects upon one of the bottom steps of the stairs. A gold watch, number 97163, by Barrad of London. Gold Albert chain, very heavy and solid. Gold ring with Masonic device. Gold pin, bulldog's head with rubies as eyes. Russian leather card case with cards of Enoch Day Drebber of Cleveland, corresponding with the EJD upon the linen. This is what this guy has. He's got a watch, and this would, of course, be a pocket watch, and has a number. Watches at that time were fairly complex to make. They were all numbered, so you would buy their makers, so you would know precisely which watch you had. If something went wrong with it, they would know when they made it and how it changed from the different ones. And with that kind of money, you could also track him down if somebody stole it. And he has some gold jewelry. One of them is a gold ring. That means he's a Freemason. And the identification card, the visiting cards with the Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland, of course, wonderful Ohio. And that's how they guess who this is. No purse, but loose money to the extent of £7.13. So he doesn't have a wallet, but he's got some money shoved in his pocket. Not a lot, but enough to get around. Pocket edition of Boccaccio's Decameron, with the name of Joseph Strangerson upon the flyover. 2 letters, one addressed E.J. Drebber, and one to Joseph Stangerson. So he's also got a book, and many people, I do in fact, when you get a book, you write your name on the inside, generally with an ex libris, which means from the library of, so that people know whose book it is. In case people borrow your books, you can get them back. But it is not, the name inside the book is not the same name as upon the calling cards. And there are also 2 letters. One letter is addressed to the name on the visiting cards, and one letter is addressed to the name on the books. On what address for the letters? American Exchange, Strand, to be left till called for. They are both from the Guion Steamship Company and refer to the sailing of their boats from Liverpool. It is clear that this unfortunate man was about to return to New York. So I said there's a not an embassy, but a business place for foreign travelers, Americans, in London on the beach. That's where you can get your mail and do things like that. So a ship company, and that's how you would get back and forth. This is before planes. You would take a ship from New York. That was our main port here. Some people would leave from Boston, but pretty much everybody from New York. Over to Liverpool, which is a major shipping port that is closer than London. It's just on the right side. I said, well, this guy's got some letters from the shipping company. Of course, he was going to go home. Have you made any inquiries? Is this man Stangerson? I did it at once, sir, said Christ. I have advertisements sent to all the newspapers. One of my men has gone to the American Exchange, but he has not returned yet. And what about this other person? If it is another person, this other name on these letters and in this book. Have you found out who this is? And the police officer says, yep, we're trying to find out. We've asked in all the newspapers, had them run ads, and we went down to the American Exchange where these letters were sent, but we haven't heard back. Have you sent to Cleveland? We telegraphed this morning. And how did you word your inquiry? We simply detailed the circumstances and said that we should be glad of any information which could help us. He said, well, this guy's supposed to be from Cleveland, according to the calling cards. Did you ask them over in Cleveland? I said, yeah, we sent a telegraph. We don't really have good phones at this time between countries. So it's a long message, a long wait for messages. And we certainly don't have email. I said, well, what did you ask? And he said, We just told him that we found this body and that if they knew anything at all, we'd like to know. You did not ask for particulars on any point which appeared to you to be crucial. I asked about Stangerson. I said, all you did was just ask generally, said Sherlock. I said, you guys didn't ask about anything, specific questions. And Gregson, the police officer, says, well, I asked about this other name, the Stangerson. Nothing else? Is there no circumstance on which this whole case appears to hinge? Will you not telegraph again? I've said all I have to say, said Gregson in an offended voice. And Sherlock here is clearly making fun of the police officers. He said, are you sure you didn't ask a very specific question? Because there's definitely a very specific question that you should ask and would answer this whole thing. Are you going to send it again with the very specific question you definitely should have asked the first time? That is a very irritating way to talk about people, which is very much Sherlock's thing. He is not good with people. And he's upset the police officer and says, no, I have not asked a specific question, and I'm not gonna. Sherlock Holmes chuckled to himself and appeared to be about to make some remark when Lestrade, who had been in the front room while we were holding this conversation in the hall, reappeared upon the scene, rubbing his hands in a pompous and self-satisfied manner. So Sherlock said, you definitely should have asked something else. And the other police officer, Lestrade, again, Gregson's professional rival, jumps in. He's like, oh, I've definitely discovered something. Mr. Gregson, he said, I've just made a discovery of the highest importance, one which would have been overlooked had I not made a careful examination of the wall. Lestrade says, ha, I got you, Gregson. I found an awesome clue, and it's because I was really checking stuff out. The little man's eyes sparkled as he spoke. He was evidently in a state of suppressed exultation at having scored a point against his colleague. Again, he definitely wants to get a promotion over Gregson. So he is thrilled that he found something. He's, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, I'm definitely winning this one. Come here, he said, bustling back into the room, the atmosphere of which felt clear since the removal of his ghastly inmate. Now stand there. He says, guys, come back in the dining room where they just carved the dead body out. And Watson said, oh, this room is so much nicer now that there's not a dead body in here. He says, okay, now you need to stand right here and then look at this. He struck a match on his boot and held it up against the wall. Look at that, he said triumphantly. So Lestrade lights a match, and this is because this is how we need to see. We don't have a whole lot of light. There's no electric lights, so they can't flip on the switch. This may have gas lighting, that is the most common, but it's probably candles and the fireplace, none of which they've lit, because one, it's day and you get a little light in through the window, and two, because, well, those might be clues, so you don't want to destroy anything. But you'll remember that the window isn't giving great light because it's dirty. So we're looking specifically at something on the wall by the matchlight. I have remarked that the paper had fallen away in parts. In this particular corner of the room, a large piece had peeled off, leaving a yellow square of coarse plaster. Across this bare space, there was scrawled in blood-red letters a single word, Rach. So what we couldn't see before, because it was so dim in there, but we can now see by the light of the match, is this word, Rach, R-A-C-H-E, which is not a word in English. But it is written on the wall behind the wallpaper, where the wallpaper's fallen away. What do you think of that? Cried the detective with the air of a showman exhibiting a show. This was overlooked because it was in the darkest corner of the room and no one thought of looking there. He said, Lestrade, the second police officer, ha 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 ha, I've discovered something that you guys all missed because you couldn't see it and it was too dark and you didn't even bother looking. The murderer has written it with his or her own blood. See the smear where it's trickled down the wall? that disposes of the idea of suicide. So we know there's blood all over the room, and we know it didn't come from the victim because there were no injuries to the victim. And everybody's been assuming that all this extra blood is from the murderer, probably during a fight. And somebody wrote, presumably the murderer, in blood on the wall, Raj. Why was that corner chosen to write it on? I will tell you. See that candle on the mantelpiece? It was lit at the time. And if it was lit, this corner would be the brightest instead of the darkest portion of the wall. So remember, the little red candle was sitting on the mantelpiece above the fire. If that was lit, then this wouldn't be so dark because we could see by the candlelight, and this would be the place where we could see everything. And that is why Lestrade figures, they wrote that on there. And they're going to continue to discuss this and figure out what this clue means. Pardon me. But we're running out of our time, so let's go ahead and stop there. Stop. Yep, and we're back. So, PALS TV, do I have the unmuting thing? All right, so that's where we're at. We found some clues. It's all very confusing because we are not Sherlock Holmes and we didn't write this. But we will find out more next week. So we're off to the races here. Anybody give a wave if you want to chat. That is a huge hat, Bianca. Nope, wait, there's Caitlin.
Happy birthday, Phil.
Thank you, Caitlin. You're very
Happy
kind.
birthday, Phil!
Thanks.
Hat's a symbol!
I don't have a hat.
New stream!
Happy birthday, Phil.
Happy birthday, Phil! We love you! All the way down the hall!
Those are lovely hats.
Show them the board that looks just like you.
Let me see if I can move this back enough.
Oh my God.
I'm going to have to unplug from everything. Am I slowed down? I can't tell if you're seeing
That's Phil's board.
that or not because
All right, but
I've lost.
let's have some fun.
There we go.
Pacey. Sure.
Oh, Dusty, I love your hat.
Thank
Wow.
you. As my baseball team on there, the Cincinnati Reds, and my other one, the Cleveland Indians. I have Cleveland Indians hats as well.
Zoom in. Phil, you got to
Why
zoom
would-
in on one that looks like you. You guys look at this. There he is.
Dusty, I would say stick with the Reds. Everybody loves the
Yep.
Red Sox.
I'm a Reds fan, and I'm also an Indians fan.
So am I.
Thing to be.
Yep.
We hope you have a special day, Phil.
Hope you have a special day. Hope everybody does.
Happy birthday.
Hila, it's Phil's birthday. Kiss the screen or something.
Happy birthday, Phil.
Are you serious? It's your dude's birthday. There you go. Aw.
Thanks, Gilligan.
That's it. So do you have special plans of sitting in the dark tonight, Phil, to celebrate your day of birth?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely going to sit in the dark because that's what I love to do. But I'm having tacos first because it's a Tuesday.
That's fair. I even wrote birthday on the hat because I can use this again.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
That makes it very handy that way.
it does. All about utility over, anything. So
You even spelled it right.
what?
Everything I don't care.
Well, please tell
You,
me
Bianca.
that would make it a much better hat if you spelled
Tuesday.
it right.
2 sessions of Bianca in one day is too much. All right. She's muted. Thank you, Phil, for having book club. I look forward to hearing when he finally does reveal all the stuff that he is definitely, it seems like he knows what's going on. So that's Sherlock. He is one smart dude. So stick around. We'll be going for a walk outside in Heath. Happy birthday, Phil. And we'll be back here shortly. So I'll let you guys take yourselves off mute and socialize until then. I'll see you soon.